Hello everyone, welcome to this lunchtime webinar. My name is Jenny Soreskog-Turp and I'm the lead for postgraduate education in the RCVS. Joining me today are two veterinary surgeons, Professor Stephen May and Shauna McIntyre. So we're doing two CPD webinars this week. On Thursday we have one about what counts as CPD, but today we're focusing on reflection. So today I'm hoping to give you an overview of what reflection is, the role of reflection in the outcomes-based CPD requirement, and just some practical tips of how you record reflection and how you can record it using One CPD. But the aim of today is really to focus on what you want to get out of it and things that you are unsure of. So we have received questions as part of the registration process, and we will be answering them as we go along, or we have a live Q&A session at the end of this webinar. So if you have any questions as I talk or as one of my colleagues talk, please just pop them in the chat box, and my colleague Joe will then collate all the questions and will answer them at the end. So remember, there are no stupid questions, and make sure that you ask the questions that are relevant to you so that you can get the most out of this webinar. Okay, let's get started. So we are changing the CPD requirement from next year to a more outcomes-focused requirement. So it means you still need to undertake the hours, so 35 hours for veterinary surgeons and 15 hours for veterinary nurses. But your approach to CPD will change slightly. So you'll use the outcomes-based cycle of plan, do, record, and reflect. And I know many of you are already doing that, but for some, the biggest change is probably incorporating reflection into your CPD. So what is reflection? As a basic explanation, it's about learning from experience and about that change that derived from your learning. How is that going to change your future situations? So it's something that most of us do instinctively, but making it part of the CPD requirement will be a more deliberate process. And reflection really isn't a tick box exercise. It's one of the most common comments or questions that we get. And I think, as with everything in life, if you make it into a tick box exercise, it's more likely to be one. But I hope that as you get more familiarized with what reflection is, how to record it, you'll see the value of reflection. And remember that reflecting as a professional is quite different than reflecting as a student. We're not after a reflective essay here. It's just about thinking about your learning and changes from that learning. We've developed One CPD, which is a recording portal that's available both as an app and a website to make it as easy for you as possible to record your reflections. And I'll give you a short demo towards the end of this webinar just to show you how to use it. But to get us started, Professor Stephen May has recorded a presentation about reflection. We have a shorter version as part of this live webinar, but you'll be able to access the full version on our website, and my colleague Deborah will send you the link to access it. So let's hear from Stephen.
All of us would claim legitimacy for our profession based on the fact that it is scientifically evidence-based and offers a service of value to society. For me, working in this positivist paradigm, it is important that our reflections are anchored in what I see as reality. The cycle of reflection, often described by social scientists, that confines individuals to exploring internal truths, linking emotion to experience, and coming to conclusions on which to base actions, is therefore inadequate, and in relation to our professional work, could cynically be seen as confirming our own prejudices. Therefore, as well as analysing our feelings, our actions, and the part that we have played in these, our professional reflective cycle needs to triangulate with scientific evidence and accepted practice based on the collective inputs and experience of all members of our professions. If we understand all this and are able to draw all these different threads together, appreciative as well as critical, the task and ourselves as agents of the task, our internal truths and experience with external grounding, I would argue that we become more effective, more engaged, and more balanced as clinicians. At the same time, through reflection, we are continually tackling issues that are central to our well-being, namely the reasonable expectations that our clients can have of us and the reasonable expectations that we can have of ourselves.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. And I've had the pleasure of working with Stephen, so I've learned a lot about reflections from him. So I would encourage you all to go and see his full presentation on our website. And on our website, there's also lots of other videos about the benefits of reflection and how to do it. So how do you do it in a practical sense? It's a process to evaluate the impact of a CPD activity and the impact it's had on your professional needs. So it's important to take the time to review the CPD activity to assess the benefit of your learning and if it's have any impact on you as a professional. So the focus here is really to, did you learn anything and how is that going to influence you, your practice or your behavior? So it could be any type of learning, learning as part of your everyday role, discussions with a colleague, reading, or more formal CPDs, webinars and courses. And then after that, just thinking about what did I learn and is that going to change anything? And reflection isn't separate to CPD or learning. It's an essential element to learning, but it's got wider benefits than that. Reflection can validate your existing knowledge, your skills, but also challenge your current practice and beliefs. And it's really important to take the time and allow yourself to take the time to reflect not just on negatives experience and negatives outcomes, but also on positive ones. Because I think we think of reflection as something we have to do when something's gone wrong, which is not the case. And what I hear quite a lot is, I didn't learn anything, do I still need to reflect? And reflecting that you didn't learn anything from your CPD is a completely valid conclusion. I think we've all been there, and it might be that the format of the CPD wasn't quite right for you. Maybe it was the speaker, or the topic just wasn't pitched at the right level for you. And that can then help to guide your future choices. So that's why it's an outcomes-based cycle. It's not a beginning or an end. So that reflection can then help you understand how you get the most of your CPD moving forward and help you plan future choices. And as I said, reflection isn't a tick box exercise. One size doesn't fit all. It's all about what makes sense to you and what works for you. Reflection has got a different meaning and applications for everyone. So if you're new to reflections, maybe try doing it in a few different ways and see what works for you. And I think what's really important is that you're going to do it different depending on the situation. So you could reflect on your own with a mentor or a colleague or a part of a group. And sometimes a reflective discussion as part of a group can be really beneficial and just lead to more ideas and actions of change. But think that the purpose of CPD is to add the value to your service or to the care that you provide. So therefore, it is really valuable to reflect on the changes resulting from your learning. And the key here is to make sharing your reflections and learning from your reflection an integral part of your practice. And I think most of us do reflect. But it is then, how do I record it? How much details do I need to put on the reflective notes? And again, think about what makes sense for you. Focus on a few just the key points, the learning. What did I learn? What were the key things I learned? And what impact does that have on you or your future practice? And then you might just want to put a few bullet points or go into more detail. It all depends on the situation. You could also include any future plans for learning. And are you going to share your CPD outcomes with anyone or your reflections? And you can add that to your notes. But again, it makes sense to you and the situation. As we tested the outcomes-based cycle, we did a CPD pilot over 2 years, and we found that many members who were not used to using reflection found it quite daunting just to have a blank piece of paper or, a recording portal in front of them. So we developed 3 prompts just to help guide them through the process. And we have incorporated them into One CPD. So I'll show you later how that works. And it's just thinking about how did the CPD relate to your learning objectives and plan? What are the key things you learned? And what impact has the CPD undertaken had on you as a professional or in your role? So you can then follow these questions, but I'll show you a more flexible approach to reflection as well. But before that, we'll hear from Shauna McIntyre about her approach to reflection.
Hi, thanks very much, Jenny. Jenny and the team just asked me to say a few words about reflection and how that fits into my experience as CPD. I wanted to sort of reassure you all that I'm not organised enough to say that I record and reflect straight away after attending an event, but I think that's okay. Nor does everything that I do fit into a really strict CPD plan. And I think that's okay too. As Jenny said, it's CPD and our reflections are supposed to be a kind of evolving process. So as clinicians, we're constantly reflecting on cases. We often take them home with us and we mull them over for hours on end often. But we're naturally the sort of people who develop because of our experiences and use them constructively. So I think we need to remember this when it comes to filling out our One CPD app reflections. It's not an onerous activity, it's something that we should all be used to doing in our sort of day-to-day lives. So I often start with CPD activities which match my objectives that I've made in my CPD plan, or sometimes simply areas that I want to improve in. And I use my reflections to consider whether I've fulfilled these objectives or whether there are further areas that I'd like to explore. And this sort of leads me back round that CPD cycle to adjust my plan. It's an evolving process. I quite like to do CPD in both clinical work and also other areas. And once I've completed the courses, I often like to take a few days to mull them over, think about what I've learned, and then maybe go back to the app. And actually, if I do a few little bits of CPD all close together, I sometimes like to consider them all as a one and reflect upon them as an entirety. And that helps me decide what I found most useful and what I've learned. I like to think about whether the CPD I've done has challenged me, whether it's taught me something I can really use on a day-to-day basis. And I often note down key things that I've taken away from the CPD, as well as a general feeling of how much I've enjoyed it. When I first started using the One CPD app, I did like to use the 3 questions to guide my reflections, which made me think a bit more critically about my CPD. So these are, which objective does this relate to? What did I learn? What impact has this had? But now I'm a bit more familiar with the app and with doing reflections, I like to use the free comments a bit more, and so that I can be a bit more varied in my reflective comments. I'm also now a bit happier to reflect that perhaps the CPD I didn't meet the objective I was hoping for. And also, having started the Vet GDP training, I found it quite useful to be able to upload documents from the exercises in the course, and that forms part of my reflection, but is also there for future reference. So I thought maybe it would be helpful to give you a couple of examples of the types of reflections that I've done recently. So I attended the BSAVA conference, and this allowed me to attend a variety of different sessions, which was wonderful. And following the conference, I was able to think really critically about what I attended. And I realised that some of the sessions I went to were in areas that I'm interested in and quite experienced in, so they didn't push me or challenge me as much as I would have liked to. So my reflection was that I need to go back, I need to review available resources, I need to think about challenging topics and look at areas where I might not be as confident clinically. From a non-clinical example, I recently attended a leadership training course, and I have done a few of these in the past. And during this course, I was able to reflect in a sort of twofold manner. One, on the delivery of the course, and secondly, on the content. So for this recent course, I felt that I didn't really learn as many new concepts as I would have liked to, although it did allow me to go back and review things that I'd learned previously. The format of the course, however, was run online, and I was able to reflect that I felt this was less conducive to me having an open conversation and discussion than it might have been if it was face-to-face. I use this example particularly to say that it's okay in a reflection to say that you didn't enjoy the CPD as much as you might have done, or you didn't get out of it what you would have liked to meet your objectives. But when this happens, I really like to go back to the planning stage and try to think about what I might look for next that might help meet that objective that I missed out on. So that choosing CPD is a responsive process rather than being stuck to a really prescriptive CPD plan. So hopefully you've found this a helpful insight into how I look at the CPD reflective process. But if I'm really struggling, I like to go back to basics and I ask myself a few simple questions. What went well or not so well with the CPD? What did I learn? What will I take with me moving forward? And has this made me look for CPD in another specific area? And when I've thought about this, I just come up with a few simple sentences to capture my reflections. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of an overview of how I approach it and what I do, and I hope you found that helpful.
Great, thank you, Shauna. So just before we go to questions, I will just show you how you can record your reflections using One CPD. So let's hope this works. Okay, so in December we did a few webinars about how to use One CPD. So you can go back on our website and look at them, and I'll give you an overview to One CPD because I'll just go through the reflection section very quickly here. So we have two different ways to reflect on your CPD. You have the guided reflections or the free format. And in the guided reflection, you'll see the 3 prompts or the 3 questions that we developed as part of the CPD pilot. We have how did it relate to your plan? What are the key things you learned and the impacts? So then you can just click in the text box and type in your answers and then move to the next one. But what I think is really useful using the phone is that you can then dictate to your phone and it somehow magically just transforms it into text, which I find really useful. So I'll just show you how that works. So you'll see on my phone, next to the space bar, I just have a microphone button. So if I click on that, I can just talk into my phone and it should transfer it into text. Here are my reflections. See how easy it is. And then I'll just tap on the keyboard to get back, and then I can go to the next one. And again, you can use the dictate button there. And remember that you can choose how you want to use it. Do you want to go through each question, or do you just want to answer 1 or 2? Or as Shauna said, you might just want to, just after the event, you could put in the key things you learn and then go back a few days later and think about the impact. It's completely up to you, and it's none of the boxes are mandatory. So it's about how works best for you. So we have the guided reflection, but also the free format. So you just click on free, and then you'll have the open text box. So you can just add your reflections in there. And again, you can just type on the microphone button and dictate your reflections. Or you can choose to add an attachment. And the attachments you can add is a photo. So that could be a photo of most things. But for example, might be some handwritten notes that you used as part of your reflections, and you can add that to your One CPD portfolio. You can also choose a photo from your gallery or add an attachment. But what I think is really useful and makes reflection straightforward is to record an audio. So if you click on that one, you will just the app will record the audio file, which will then be saved to your portfolio. So that means that you don't have to take extra time at the end of the day to reflect on your CPD. It could just be something you do as part of your normal day, and it also gives you the flexibility to reflect in different ways. So you can reflect on your own, you have a few minutes over to record your reflections, you do it over a cup of coffee with your colleague and record that reflection, or you can bring your app in a team meeting or a team discussion and record those reflections, and then you just have it as part of your One CPD app. So that's how easy it is to record your reflections using One CPD app. And as I said, we also have the website for those who do not want to use the mobile app. So that is all from me. So let's move over to your questions and see what you'd like some further information about.
Okay, thank you. So Jenny, the first set of questions are for you, and this is a mix of questions we've received as part of people's registration and live. So the first question is reflection a mandatory part of CPD in 2021?
So it becomes mandatory from 2022, so next year. The outcomes-based requirement is part of the requirement. But I would encourage you to start using it already, because practice really does make perfect. And the more you reflect on your CPD, the easier the process will become.
Thank you. And is there a format for reflection with specific headings?
Yes, as I showed you, you can use the guided reflection in One CPD, both on the app and on the website, just to guide you through the process, but you can also use the more flexible approach.
What is the RCVS looking for in our reflection?
So we are not looking to mark your reflection or to be the teacher here. It's really about what you get out of it, what makes sense for you. As long as your reflections are of benefit to you, that's the most important thing here. Okay. And that's what we're looking for.
And is there a reflection toolkit?
So we have some information in One CPD that will guide you through how to reflect, either a guided version or the free format. But also on our website, we have quite a lot of information about reflection. We have Stephen's full presentation, but also some shorter videos about reflection. And I know that Joe, you, as part of our social media profile, you also have some videos about vets and nurses reflecting on their CPD.
We do. There are quite a lot of resources on our social media and, as you said, Jenny, on our website. So there's quite a lot of resources available, including the recordings of these workshops about One CPD that we did before Christmas. Are we going to be marked on our reflections?
So again, no, reflection is part of the requirement. So you do need to incorporate it as part of the requirement, but again, it is what works for you. We will all reflect in different ways. Me, Shauna, Stephen will all reflect in different ways, and if someone were to look at them, they would be completely different. So think about this, what makes sense for you, and try different ways. But just focus on that learning and the impact on your learning, because that's the main points of reflection. But think about what makes sense to you and what will be of value for you if you go back and look at your reflections.
Great, thank you. After coming back from a break, I did some CPD to revise some topics, but I didn't learn anything new. How do I reflect on this CPD?
So yeah, so that's your reflections. You didn't learn anything new, but then you might want to think about, okay, so what, and then plan future activities. So instead, think about why you didn't learn anything, were they not right topic or formats, and how can you approach it in another way?
Okay, I've never set out learning objectives. Do we need to do this?
I think if you look at the planning section in One CPD, it makes it really easy to add some learning objectives, and then you can then link it to your activity. And learning objective doesn't have to be so formal. It's just thinking about what you want to do as you move forward. And it doesn't have to be a whole year in advance. It could just be a case comes in and you just want to learn a bit more about it. So it can be something that you're just doing as part of your everyday role. It doesn't have to be something you need to do for another 12 months or so.
Okay, and we've had a couple of questions asking, how do I get the One CPD app?
So if you look on our website, we have the webinar about new users, and I'll show you, and it goes through exactly how you download the app and your username and password and everything. So Joe and Deborah, maybe you can send or share that webinar after.
We can certainly include the link to that in the follow-up email for sure. In a non-clinical environment, there would be some information which is confidential. If it's uploaded, is that safe?
I mean, again, focus on your learning and how you're going to use it. You don't have to record all details about the case and details. So focus on those key details of your reflection.
Okay, and there are a couple of questions around kind of templates for reflection or a scoring system, but I think that's probably covered off in the One CPD reflection section. Yes,
it's certainly not about scoring, so it's about what's beneficial to you, but there is the guided reflection that does guide you through how to do it. And again, I would just, if you're not sure of how to use One CPD, look at the webinars that we did, because it goes through it in more details, because I did it quite quickly now.
Great, thank you. There's one more question for Jenny in this section, and then we'll move on for questions for Shona and Stephen. Currently, it's easy to tell if one has complied with the RCVS CPD requirement. How will we know if our reflection passes, in inverted commas, the RCVS requirement?
So as I said, it's not going to be marked. You'll see as you use the app how many hours you have reflected on. So it'll be easy for you to see that you met the requirements both in hours and reflection. But you don't have to wait for anyone from the RCVS to go through and say, yes, that's a tick box that you've done it. As long as you reflect on your CPD, thinking about your learning and how you're going to use it, and then that's fine. It's all about how it's beneficial to you. That is what reflection is all about.
Great, that's really helpful. Thank you. So moving over to questions for Shona now. How much detail do you go into when you reflect?
So it varies. I mean, I just try and think about the key things, you know, what did I learn? What did I think was good about that CPD? What am I going to take with me? And really try and keep it quite succinct, write a few sentences. I haven't actually recorded a voice recording, but the same would apply. I think a few succinct sentences on what was important to me is really all that's needed. I don't think anyone's sort of expecting big, long essays, really.
Thank you. And do you reflect by yourself or with others?
So I think it really depends on the type of CPD you're doing. I think if I attend a lecture or a conference as an individual, then I would probably reflect upon that activity by myself. But if I was having a case discussion, we were doing something in practice, I was doing something with a group of colleagues, then perhaps we would all kind of reflect upon how that activity has affected all of us as a group. And then I would probably go and record something about that afterwards.
Great, thank you. And do you reflect on every CPD activity you record?
Yes, I do. I don't necessarily do it straight away. And as I said, I sometimes kind of consider a few activities together and then go back. But I do certainly try and put something for each of the activities I've undertaken.
So we've got something I think we've covered, but I think it's probably useful to revisit. Should I do reflection straight after my CPD or once I've used my CPD learning in practice?
So I guess there's a couple of answers to that. I often take a day or so to really have a think about the impact that the CPD's had on me. Where I complete my, I think that's completely valid. If you've got something you really want to note down straight away that you think is important, then obviously you can do that straight away. I think the second part of that question is about, should I reflect once I have put that learning into practice? Now, actually, that would be a really lovely thing to do. And it's kind of taking a step on from, you know, what did I learn at the CPD and then how did I implement that? And there's nothing to stop you going back into the app after that time and adding an additional comment or reflection at that point.
So we've had a couple of questions about reflection and how long it needs to be. So one person is saying they struggle to write at length, and then somebody else is saying sometimes they reflect as a sentence or sometimes a couple of paragraphs. Do you think the length of the reflection matters?
No, because it is something that's so personal to everybody. And whereas one person might like to write a very long commentary that's really important to them, others may just want to make a few concise comments that really demonstrate what the impact was to them individually. And I think this is the important thing, that the reflection is not a prescriptive thing. It's something that's quite fluid for the individual, and everybody's reflections will look very different. And so that's why, in a way, there can't be a sort of defined format as to how you do this. It's what reflection makes it important to you, makes you understand the impact of what you did, and has an effect on you moving forward. And so if that is able to be done in a couple of sentences or a short voice clip, then that is perfect. If that's something you'd rather write a much longer detail about, then again, equally, feel free to do so.
Great, so we've got a couple of questions for Stephen now. So the first question is, what's the aim of reflecting on RCPD? Is it a box ticking exercise?
I'd be disappointed if it ended up a box ticking exercise, because to me, reflection is central to how we function as balanced professionals. And lots of people perhaps don't realise that they're doing it as they go along in their daily work, or they recognise it, but they maybe don't see the value of recording it. I think jotting it down, though, does help you focus. It crystallises my thinking very often, and as is already said, that can be a few words, or if we get really involved, it can be a few sentences or paragraphs. It will vary for me like it varies for Shona, and I'm sure lots of others. But in crystallising that thinking, it helps us be more organised, certainly around our CPD, in terms of what's meaningful for us. Are we just attending things that we know anyway, and the return on time spent is quite poor? Or are we genuinely addressing areas of need in terms of what we're doing day to day? And also then in terms of what we're taking from that CPD, what can we really value and build into our practice, and what maybe was a waste of time and we're not going to go there again. So it can make us feel more confident that we're using our time well, and not being just overwhelmed by the massive opportunities, which increasingly are for CPD. Reflection is then saying, but what do I need out of this, and helping confine that to our genuine needs.
Thank you. And the next question is there any evidence that reflecting on our CPD can help reduce anxiety doing the job as a vet professional? So
going back a number of years now, Tierney Kinnison and I, working on some of the early participants in the Certificate of Advanced Veterinary Practice, particularly around the professional skills module, as it then was, were interested in the learning that had gone on. But what we were finding from a lot of those participants was, and by the way, this is really helping me understand myself, and surprisingly reducing my anxiety and making me feel really good about going into work each day, where I was starting to feel actually anxious and apprehensive because I was feeling overwhelmed. So some of the participants were almost, well, were saying they were surprised by this, and we were slightly surprised. We shouldn't have been, because we weren't looking for it. And as we've got more into reflection, both in general about our work and around practice, around CPD, we've discovered that that process of really focusing on who we are, what we can do, and what we're offering, and these reasonable expectations of ourselves really helps us then control our anxieties around uncertainty, our anxieties around that feeling of being overwhelmed, in a way that if we ignore those things, we don't. So it has this meaningfully reflecting on our practice and learning, then has this sort of indirect benefit. It's not direct reflection on the anxiety, but this benefit then in reducing these signs of the fact that our lives, we're perceiving our lives as out of control.
Great, thank you. We've got some more questions that I think Jenny will probably be best placed to answer. The first question is, do we have to plan CPD now?
Well, it's part of the outcomes-based cycle of plan, do, record and reflect. But you know, it's a dynamic process. Not everything will need to be planned. So, but you might want to take a bit of time just to step back and think about what you actually want to get out of your CPD. And as I said, it doesn't have to be a long-term plan. It can also be a short-term plan. It could be something a case come into your practice and you realize that you actually need just to brush up on your skills in that area.
We've had a couple of questions about the time expected to be spent on reflection. So can you please just clarify that the CPD hourly target is separate from the time spent reflecting?
Well, it may be. If you do these, just the short reflection is not going to take up much of your time. But if you go into more in-depth reflections, then it can be part of the CPD requirement, and you can also count that CPD as part, that reflection as part of your CPD.
Thank you very much. So the next question, if I reflect that was a waste of time, would I need to find more hours to make sure I had done my 35 hours of useful CPD?
Well, you can still record the CPD activity, but for your own benefit, you might want to go think about what you want to do next and what CPD works best for you, so you don't waste your time doing CPD that you don't learn anything from.
I'm a newly qualified RVN. Is this reflection similar to NPL reflection? Just not sure I'm going down the right path for the CPD I've carried out.
Yes, it will be some similarity to NPL. And again, just if you're not sure of how to do it, you can use the guided reflection in One CPD and just going through these 3 prompts. But just try not to overthink it too much. Think about, did you learn anything? What were the key things you learned, and how are you going to use it? Did it improve your knowledge, your skills, or will it change your behavior in any way? And you can just add those notes there. And again, it doesn't have to be long. It could just be a few sentences or bullet points.
Great, thank you. So we've got 3 more questions. Are there any examples of reflection I can refer to in the future?
Joe, are there any? Do we have a few examples of reflections on our website?
Yeah, so I think there's probably 2 ways that we could answer that. So there are examples of how to reflect. So Jenny's demonstration of reflecting in the One CPD app. So you could revisit the recording of that section. There's also recordings of the One CPD app and how to use it on our website. And then Jenny again shows you how to reflect. We don't, I believe, have any examples of a vet or vet nurse reflecting on their CPD. Shona, I'm not sure if there's anything that you could chime in with here, if there's any examples that you're familiar with.
There's none that I know of online, but if you want, I can read some out of my One CPD app, if that helps.
That would be great.
So like, I can give you an example of one perhaps that I did a while ago where I used the guided reflective notes, if that's useful. So just for a bit of context, this CPD was where I joined a multidisciplinary rounds. So we had a number of different people from different avenues who were all getting together to discuss some cases and sort of you know, do some guided clinical learning, basically, in a multidisciplinary way. So initially it says, how did this CPD relate to your learning objectives and plans? So my learning objectives for this year hadn't included that. The way I set my learning objectives is basically topics that I want to do. So in that area, I had simply written, this was not related to my objectives. It was a chance opportunity to undertake something new. What are the key things you've learned? So in here, I said, the multidisciplinary nature of treating cases, which involve behaviour and neurology, was incredibly interesting, and the insight into how other clinicians undertake certain aspects of these cases has really helped me look at these from a wider aspect. And then what impact has this CPD undertaken on you as a professional or in your role? I've said it's given me a greater understanding for the challenges that my colleagues have in certain cases, but it has also led me to understand that I would like to attend more of these rounds in different disciplines to develop relationships with professionals out with my own area. So that was an example of something I did, which was a chance CPD that was a reflection on something that I wouldn't have normally taken part in, but it was something that perhaps people could relate to because it's more of a chance encounter you do in practice rather than something related to maybe going to a lecture or going to a conference. Hopefully that's helpful.
I think that is really helpful. And I think building on that and your discussion of objectives, we have a question, are the objectives those of the activity or are they your own perceived objective within the CPD?
I use the objectives to think about what I want to concentrate on for that year. So for example, I might have an objective related to upskilling in leadership training, and I might have put within that objective some targets within that I'd want to undertake. And then I might want to focus on a certain clinical area, and I'll use that clinical area as an objective that I want to target CPD in that particular clinical area because I feel like I maybe either haven't seen as many cases in that area or I want to upskill in that. So I don't write these objectives, you know, sticking to that SMART objective that we may have all learned about at university. I simply use it as a way of looking at my CPD overall and deciding on these are the key areas that I want to look at. But it's not so conscriptive that I can't do things out with those areas.
Great, and we've got just a question around personal approach, I suppose, and I think it would be useful to get your take. Someone's saying they think scoring is useful to them and it's useful to assess the impact or quality or learning needs. So presumably they could use that personally within One CPD as a way of capturing their thoughts about the CPD they've undertaken.
Yeah, I wonder what type of scoring they particularly mean. I mean, there's no scoring system from the RCVS for this because it is a very personal undertaking. I guess if that's something that somebody finds personally useful, then great, perfect, because that's part of the learning experience. But I think trying to attribute a number or a score or a grade to our reflections is not what this is about. It's about, you know, personal improvement and personal development more than anything.
Great, we've got one more question. I think this probably is for Jenny. We've had a question I still don't quite understand about the required hours. Are we saying that you have to time how long it takes you to write and record the reflection, and that counts towards your reflection hours?
So I think just go ahead, just do what you've been doing, count the hours of CPD, and as you can see, reflecting on your CPD, you know, doesn't have to take more than a few minutes. So so you don't have to record those reflections and count them towards your CPD. But if you go into more depth, so you spend time reflecting in depth on your CPD, so it might take half an hour or an hour with that, just reflecting on CPD, then you can of course count it as part of your CPD. But everyday cases, there will be, your reflection won't take up that much time that you'll be able to count it towards the CPD requirement.
Great. So I think we've covered hopefully all of the questions that have come in. So thank you very much for everybody for asking those questions, and I'm hopefully they were useful in answering.
Thank you, everyone. And if you do want to share how you reflect, please get in touch with us. The best email address is cpd@rcvs.org.uk. Thank you and have a nice afternoon.